This is the Ultraviolette F77 Mach 2, and while the name may suggest that this is a second generation motorcycle, it's more of a second iteration. The company's idea here is to just basically improve the experience for the owner and improve the appeal of an electric motorcycle. And having ridden it today, I can tell you that there aren't that many changes in terms of numbers, but the effect those changes have improved the experience. Let's start with what you get to look at. Now, visually, the motorcycle is pretty much the same. All the body panels are the same. Nothing physical has changed, but the bike gets a whole bunch of new colors. These are more exciting colors. This yellow looks really good. There's a bunch of others, and there's a white, which I think looks really nice on a futuristic looking electric motorcycle. But like I said, apart from that, things haven't really changed. There is one change that we really appreciate. On the original F77, the charging flap was quite a flimsy unit. It is now a nice aluminum unit, and it shuts with a great sound. This definitely improves the overall perceived quality on the bike. Now, the F77 always had a nicely made feel to it with a few small niggles. Those niggles have reduced, but there's still some areas where I think there can be some improvement. For example, this black plastic out here doesn't look that premium, and the switchgear has a bit of a panel gap in our unit at least. Small areas that could improve, but in general, this feels like a nicely put together motorcycle with some really nice components, nice foot pegs, nice foot peg holders, a lovely looking aluminum swing arm, good headstock area. Most of the bike looks quite nice. Another thing you're going to notice visually is that the TFT display has a revised layout. It's actually the same unit as before, but the layout is now completely different, and I think it does a really good job. Some of the information out there is quite small numbers, but it's all evenly spaced out. You know what to look for, and you'll find the information you need. Now, one of the reasons the layout has been changed is because it gives you the information for what's happening with regen, and regen is where one of the most exciting changes on this motorcycle has taken place. Effectively, Ultraviolette has now given you 9 levels of regen, all the way from off to quite strong, and you can scroll through the regen between these two buttons on the move. That makes a huge difference. Now, I have ridden EVs with different levels of regen, and it's quite nice, but you're effectively stuck with 1 or 2 levels. Here, you can change it based on the need or just based on your mood. If you're riding aggressively, it's nice to have the regen set all the way up, because it really helps with the braking. Now, the F77 has pretty good brakes, but this is also a very heavy motorcycle. It's 207 kilos, which is more than pretty much every 1000cc super sport bike out there. With the earlier F77, we did report that when you brake really hard, particularly downhill on a ghat section continuously, the brakes do suffer a little bit. We haven't had a chance to ride the bike that hard today, but I can tell you that this regen braking really helps slow the bike down quite well. The other area where max regen would be really nice is in the city, because it means you can slow down without having to use the brakes, and that just makes life a little easier. Out on the highway though, you'd want to coast. You wouldn't want the bike to slow down aggressively every time you close the throttle, so you can back the regen down maybe to level 3 or turn it off. That adjustability is really nice, and I think it really improves the experience of riding this bike and also gives it a bit of character. In the maximum level 9, the regen is really quite strong. Ultraviolette tells us that their system can harvest up to 30% of the energy and send it back to the battery pack. And they had a really interesting stat. They say that the peak regen going back to the battery pack is more than any other electric two-wheeler in India in terms of how much power it puts out to the rear wheel. That's how powerful this thing is. Now, speaking of power, they have updated the motor slightly. There's a little bit more power, there's a little bit more torque, and they now make for very nice numbers. Peak power is now 40 horsepower, and peak torque on the top model you see here is 100 Newton meters. Because of the strong regen, Ultraviolette also had to integrate a new dynamic stability program, because sometimes if you're braking hard, the rear can lock with strong regen on. ABS also works very differently to regen, and Ultraviolette had to make both those systems work together. So they have a new DSC program in this motorcycle. Another safety feature is that it now has traction control, 3 levels plus off. I left on the lowest setting and it really didn't bother me on the road, but if you ride over a sandy patch at low speeds, it prevents the rear wheel from spinning up. And with 100 Newton meters of torque, that can happen quite easily. So those are effectively the main software related changes that Ultraviolette has made to the bike, and fundamentally it is the same thing as it was before. There is a 10.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack in here, which is the biggest on any EV in India, and that means that you get a good range of above 300 kilometers. In fact, Ultraviolette says that with their software optimization, they've been able to increase the range to about 323 claimed range, which is a good figure. We've been riding quite hard today in the top 2 modes, and I think I'm on par to get about 180 to 200 kilometers of range. Ride gently and that number will go much higher. If you ride flat out in ballistic mode, which is great fun, I suspect that number will drop closer to about 150 kilometers. Nevertheless, the F77 has taken us to the point where an EV motorcycle can now comfortably handle a 200km round trip out of the city to some fun roads. Once the company installs its fast chargers at carefully selected riding hotspots outside big cities, owning a bike like this will be a lot more appealing. This is something Ultraviolette is actively working towards. Because there's a big battery pack, this is a heavy motorcycle, 207 kilos, and that really does dictate the riding experience. On a smooth and flowing road, this bike is really good fun to ride. It's a sporty, engaging thing, and it always has hidden its weight well in those scenarios. However, there are a few situations where you will feel that weight. The first is just picking it up off the stand. You're also going to feel it under hard braking. You will feel it if you have to make a sudden maneuver. You see a pothole, you make a sudden counter steer movement, you'll feel the weight. In general though, the bike handles itself really well. It has good MRF tires, the braking system is good, there's enough power, and it is an exciting bike to ride. The riding position hasn't changed, which means that it's much more aggressive than a street naked, but not quite as aggressive as a full-on fared sports bike. Like before, comfort is decent on smooth surfaces, but you will take a bit of a beating on bad roads. Then again, this is completely to be expected from a sporty motorcycle like this. I also got to briefly ride the lower model with a smaller battery pack. The 10 kilo weight saving can clearly be felt, and that bike handles better thanks to the lower stresses that its suspension has to deal with. But I don't think that the improvement is dramatic enough to justify the sizable sacrifice that you will have to make in battery range. If you look at the performance numbers on paper, this is about 250 to 300cc levels of performance, and that's not really so impressive for the price. But when you ride this bike, you will realize that it is a completely unique riding experience that no petrol engine bike of this size can match. The uninterrupted torque delivery is quite an addiction, and this is a very different experience. Ultraviolette is aware that just offering a different riding experience isn't enough, and that's why they've lowered the price. The Mark II now starts at 2.99 lakh rupees ex-showroom for the base version, which has a 7.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack. This top Recon with a 10.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack, that starts at 3.99 lakh rupees. These are introductory prices, but they will put this bike on the radar of many 300 to 400cc buyers. There's also the fact that Ultraviolette is now so confident in their battery and drivetrain technology that they are offering some amazing warranty packages that pretty much no one else in the world can match. Another unique aspect is that this bike has more intelligent features than any of its petrol rivals. These include a new hill hold system that works very well. You also get things like fall, crash and tow alerts, tire pressure monitoring, a park assist, and much more, although some of these are optional. I suppose the question that remains is whether the F77 now has enough appeal to tempt you away from a normal petrol-powered alternative. The answer to that basically lies in whether you're looking for something different. I definitely believe that this is a more appealing motorcycle than the one it replaces, and I really like what the technology enables. Ultraviolette can keep enhancing this platform, and the beauty of it is that all the existing F77s on the road can and will be upgraded to Mark II spec free of cost. That's amazing. All these features can be done via a software update. That is the future of this segment. Are you ready for that future? Well, that's a question only you can answer. But if you want to try something different, this bike is a great place to start.